Hello there, and welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash, and I'm your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now today I'm out in the woods, one of my favourite places of all time, and I'd like to have a conversation with you about a topic which is often overlooked in this society in which we live, in which success is seen as such an important element of everybody's life. The thing I want to talk to you about today is failure. Because failure is something we will all encounter in our lives. Our lives are full of twists and turns. And, of course, we all want to live the best version of the lives that we envisage for ourselves in the future. But for sure, we will encounter failure. Now, failure can come from an early age. You might not get the results on the exams that you're striving to be successful at, be it in school or university. You might not get the job that you want. You may not get the promotion that you seek in your profession. You may have a failed business. And for sure, we all know the feeling that comes from having a failed relationship. I mean, nobody goes through life without that crossing their path. And these things can be awful. The way that failure can cause you pain, almost at a cellular level. You feel that, your hopes and dreams have been thwarted. Your future career path has been dashed on the rocks by failure. But failure is coming. It is inevitable. But failure is also one of the most important factors that you will encounter in your life. And the way that you deal with that failure will maybe signal the success that you will be in the future. So today, I'm going to give you my 5 tips on dealing with failure like a chap. Now, my first tip for you is failure is inevitable. All right, you need to get your head around the fact that you are going to fail in life. Nobody's life is without the crushing blow of failure. Now, it doesn't matter how good you are at things. It doesn't matter how good you think you are. Pretty much everything you try that you will cross your path in life, be it sport, be it work, be it relationships, you are going to fail at some point in your journey in life. And the sooner you get your head around the fact that failure is part of your life, the sooner you will be able to leverage that failure to make things better in the future. A very pertinent saying is the fact that the only man who never fails anything is the man who never tries anything. And when you look at some of the most influential and successful people in the era in which we live, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, J.K. Rowling, all in their different spheres of operation, they have all endured crushing failure at some point. But they use that failure to channel their efforts to achieve success in the future. One particular world leader, historical somewhat now, but one which I often think of when I think of failure and how to overcome it, is Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States in one of its more turbulent times. But when you look at his life, we often now think of a man who's an absolute success. Somebody for whom, obviously the end of his life was tragic, but he made positive steps as a world leader. But his earlier life was absolutely marred by failure. He suffered a nervous breakdown at one point of his life. He suffered failure in his business endeavours. He even failed at his first run for the American presidency. But he used those failures to make his future successes possible. He channeled them. He took the sting of failure and he turned it into success. The same goes for us. When failure crosses our path, we should be sure that it's going to happen. Yes, we know, we accept it. But then we can turn that feeling into future success. Use the sting of failure to propel you to future success. Now, my next tip for you when it comes to dealing with failure is to leverage that failure. Use it as fuel to supercharge your future success. Now, I know many people who have failed at many things. Of course we all do. It's part of life. But many people I know who have failed have tried to blank out that negativity. They try to forget that failure was ever there. They put it into the dark recesses of their memory, and they just don't want to be associated with failure. They never talk about their failures. They will only talk about their successes. People who do that miss out on the opportunity to use those feelings of failure, as I say, as rocket fuel for the future. And the best way to do that is because, of course, you'll forget what that failure felt like. Your brain will push it away. It'll hide it away. The best way I have found to capture those feelings is to journal about those feelings, to write them down, to have a diary. And the best way to do it is at the time that you're going through that negativity, that failure which has crossed your path, write it down. Write down your emotions, however raw and visceral they may be, but capture them. It will be painful. It will be awful because you're in the heat of the moment and it's a bad moment. You want to forget about it. You want to push it away. Write it down. Write it down in its rawest form. Because in the future, when you're thinking about that situation, you can get that journal out and you can read about your feelings and your emotions at that time. And you can use that to leverage positivity. Because if it's a bad situation, you don't want to go back there again. You want success to be the legacy of this failure that we have suffered. And the way to do that is not to revel in the misery of your failure, but use it as power to push you forward to future success. So don't waste the opportunity if failure crosses your path. Capture it. It is a commodity. Write it down and remember, it's rocket fuel for the future. Now, my next tip of dealing with failure well is to own that failure, to take responsibility for it. Now, I know many people in my life who have been unsuccessful in things, right? They've suffered a failure. And I know many people in those situations who will look for a convenient source to blame their failure on. They will, say they've gone for a job interview and they've been unsuccessful. When they're debriefing you later in the pub about the situation, they will say, well, I didn't get the job because I think they're looking for somebody who was older and more experienced, somebody who was younger and had more of a future to give to the company. Or maybe they were looking for a man or a woman because the team is unbalanced when it comes to the genders. What they're doing is trying to blame their deficiency on a scapegoat. They are not taking responsibility for their own failure. And if you don't take responsibility for your failure, you're not going to learn from it. It doesn't become a learnable experience if failure is blamed on somebody else. It's not somebody else's deficiency, all right? It's an uncomfortable fact. But if you have failed something, it's because you haven't hit the mark. You need to own your failures. They're not anybody else's fault, they're ours. If somebody else got the job, well, they were better than us, not us. It's not their fault that we were unsuccessful. What we need to do is own it, learn from it, and use it to move forward. But please, if you've not achieved something that you wanted to, don't shift that responsibility to anybody else. That is on your shoulders. That's the only way we can move forward in a positive way if we own our own failures. Now, my next tip for you, number 4 in fact, on how to deal with failure, is never judge yourself against the performance of others. Because as we go through life, there's often going to be a temptation to look at our contemporaries. Maybe they're people we went to school with, to university with. Maybe we started in our job at the same time. And there is this, as I say, temptation to draw a comparison. You look at how they are doing in life, and in some way you judge yourself against it. You like to see that you stack up at least equally with these other people. Now, if they are high flyers and you see that they are being promoted into much better jobs, if they have got a wonderful relationship perhaps and your relationship has failed, if they're doing better in life in general, you will think, deflated. You feel that you haven't had the same good fortune smile upon you. In short, you're judging yourself against somebody else's performance in life, and if you find yourself lacking, it can be a very negative experience, particularly if you work in, say, the same industry as somebody and that person is competing for promotions with you and they've been more successful with you. There's a temptation really to feel negative about it. But my piece of advice to you here is very clear. Never judge yourself against anybody else. You only judge yourself against your own expectations of performance, because you've got no control over that other person. You don't know how they performed in the interview. They may just have a more advantageous package of skills and abilities, and you don't possess those things. They may be a fantastic public speaker, so when they go into an interview and give a presentation, they knock it out of the park. They may be a very stylish dresser, so they're subliminally sending a message of being sartorially elegant, and it's working in their favour. And I'm using these as mere examples, but there are a number of things, skills and abilities which they may possess which you presently do not. So rather than feeling miffed about it, that a friend or associate or contemporary has done better in life than you, think about how you can learn from that experience. Ask them, I was applied for that job as well. It didn't go my way, but how did you get it? What skills did they tell you were in your favour? Tell me how you've become such a polished public speaker. You look like a really sharp dresser. Where do you get your things? How have you learned to be so well put together? So rather than, stewing in a sense of false sadness that you've been unsuccessful in life and this other person has got a leg up over you, think again. Yes, they had better skills than you on this occasion. The next time you can learn from that and make yourself absolutely the person who's the one going forwards and upwards in life. Don't feel bad about this. Don't judge yourself by the performance of others. Judge yourself by your own standards, and perhaps, if anything, use the performance of others to improve your own performance in the future. Now, my final tip, number 5, in my suggested ways that you can improve your life from the failures that you encounter, is to take your failure like a gentleman. Nobody likes to see a bad loser. It leaves a really bad taste in your mouth. Now, I've got a young son, and he really loves sport, right? He's a really competitive little sportsman. And he loves his hockey, he loves tennis, and we live in a really competitive world where there is a sense that we've always got to win. The value of winning is really overemphasized in the world today. And I'm always at great pains to say to my son, remember, it is more important to lose with dignity than to win. Because, nobody really remembers a winner. But you think about times in the sporting world where people have lost badly. Tennis players who argue with the referee over a bad decision. They'll smash their rackets and walk off. Nobody remembers who won those matches, but we will all remember forever the bad manners of the people who lost without any dignity. And, I always say to my son, when you're on the pitch and you lose against a better team, acknowledge the fact they were a better team. Go up to them and shake their hands and offer your congratulations for their success. Because when somebody does that to you, it feels great. You're doing it for somebody else, and you're also showing your own dignity. Because you've lost. What more can you do? You can only lose with dignity. Now, this plays across to all walks of life, not just sport. So, there will be occasions where you've been competing for a promotion, perhaps in work, or a big sort of account with a client and you've been unsuccessful and you'll be really hurting inside. There's going to be pain, right? Real pain in the guts that you've been unsuccessful. What can you do about it? Well, you can turn that into some form of positivity from that experience. Write to the person who made the decision, be it a promotion, be it the sales account, and tell them, thank you for giving me the opportunity to compete for this promotion or this account. I'm sorry it didn't go the way I was hoping, but I really appreciate that you were in a tough position making the decision. I'm sure you've made the right decision, but in the future, I very much hope to work with you again. And thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to try. Now, you'll be really hurting when you're writing this. Your world has crashed down around you. An opportunity has been missed. It will be devastating. But when you write that down and you send it to somebody else, think of the impression that you're making upon those. They will know how challenging it has been to hear the bad news. You didn't win. You lost on the opportunity. But think of the dignity that you're showing those people that you possess. That even in your time of disappointment, you thought of them. You wrote to them. You acknowledged the position that they had and you thanked them. Now, I can think of no better way of preparing for future success than to do that. So, those were my 5 tips on dealing with failure like a man. Remember, many things are outside of our control, but there are things that we can influence by dealing with them in the way that we have today. At the very least, your job is to show up and do your best. Don't be judged by anybody else. Do the best that you can, and you can't really go wrong. So, if you've enjoyed this video, I would of course encourage you to give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to practically support the channel, you can of course buy me a coffee, and the notes explaining how to do that are in the show notes below. So, until the next time, take care of yourselves. Be prepared for failure, it is coming, but deal with it like a chap, and it will supercharge your future. So until the next time, take care, and I will see you again very soon.